For a long time, the EU and especially Germany had a bad reputation in Italy. After the EU summit, even right-wing politicians sing O Sole Mio Europa. The elderly gentleman from the neighborhood can no longer get it. Fantastic, it gushes out of him. Europe is alive, it's back, and we owe that to the triumvirate Conte, Merkel and Macron. The man who worked for the Italian Olympic Committee before retirement has never left a good hair on La Merkel in recent years, nor any good hair on Germania. But now he gives the impression that everything has changed. And this example man from a newspaper article is not alone. Media people, ministers, representatives of the government parties, all of them seem to have taken a stone off their hearts. An economist commented on the Rai Uno national television news that Europe had finally found the path from austerity to solidarity. In Parliament, the government faction celebrated Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte with the standing ovations when he came to the summit review, and Andrea Marcucci, parliamentary group leader of the Partito Democratico in the Senate, thought that Italy should now celebrate like at a World Cup. There were no autocorsos in Rome or Milan, but the enthusiasm is real. For 4 days, the turmoil in the European Council had left the impression that Italy had to accept major drawbacks in relation to the Commission's proposal for origin, but in the end much more came out than expected. According to the Commission plan, 172 billion euros were supposed to be benefited to Italy. In the final decision, the sum is now 209 billion euros from the recovery fund. Italy can now be happy that it gets the thickest chunk of European construction materials. This is justified by the fact that it experienced the deepest economic slump with the pandemic. According to a forecast by the EU Commission, the loss in gross domestic product should be 11.2% in 2020, more than in any other EU country. For comparison, a decline of 6.3% is expected in Germany. The misery can be observed in everyday life. Life on the weekend evenings pulsates in Rome around the nightlife hotspots as it did before COVID times. The turnover of the restaurants in Travestere is booming. The tables in the piazza are fully occupied. Hundreds of people, especially younger ones, are standing around, beer in hand. The streets are largely crowded with masks and gaps. But the picture is deceptive. During the day, Rome's center is unusually quiet. The souvenir shop right behind the Pantheon is open, but it's yawningly empty. Of the 1,200 hotels in Rome, only 200 are currently open and only to 10 or 15% full. The statistics are bleak indeed. Throughout June, 6,000 foreign guests got lost in Rome's hotels, 99% less than last year. And the employees? Those with permanent employment are all in short-time work, thanks to a special program that was approved in the crisis and is now extended by a further 4 months and is fully funded by the state. Around 4 million workers benefited from this measure, flanked by a layoff that was in effect until mid-August, but the government also plans to extend it until the end of the year. Nevertheless, unemployment is rising. If only because 500,000 temporary contracts have expired in the past few months without being extended. And then there are the millions of small self-employed, the owners of the shops, bars and restaurants who have lost their sales and who are now at risk of falling into poverty. Banco Alimentare, one of the most important charitable organizations in the field of food supply for the poor, fears that the number of the absolute poor will double from 5 to 10 million people next year. The government opposes this, supports jobs and income, deferred taxes for the self-employed and entrepreneurs. This leaves deep traces in the state budget. The additional COVID-related borrowing this year amounts to 100 billion euros. The new debt thus rises to 12% of the GDP. The entire mountain of debt grows to 160% of the GDP. In view of such figures, there was a certain feeling in Italy, in the political class as well as in the population, that the country could not make it alone. At the same time, however, Italy had seen itself left alone by Europe over the past 10 years, whether in the euro or the refugee crisis. And this impression seemed to be confirmed again in the first weeks of the COVID pandemic. In March, when Italy was already hit by the pandemic, when thousands of people were already dead, there was the ban on the export of protective masks imposed by both France and Germany. It was quickly cancelled, but the damage caused remained. Added to this was the German rejection of a common European response to the COVID-related recession that Italy demanded. Eurobonds? For our Minister of Economy, Peter Altmaier, it was a ghost debate. For EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, it was a slogan that needed no further attention. The result? In April and May, 50% of the people in the country, whose population was once at the forefront when it came to the European enthusiasm, could imagine Italy's exit from the EU and the euro. France and Germany won first and second place as Italy hostile nations, while China and Russia, who at the time sent out teams of doctors and medical aid goods with a high public profile, came as true friends at the top of the podium. But then in May came the Merkel-Macron push for a European Recovery Fund of 500 billion euros, when the EU Commission's proposal, which increased it to 750 billion, led into the summit. And suddenly Europe has a good sound again in Italy. The villains are no longer the EU and Germany, but just the frugal four, first and foremost the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. 1 week before the EU summit, only 40% of Italians wanted to leave the EU. Even Renato Brunetta, one of the frontmen of the Berlusconi party Forza Italia, now sees Angela Merkel, about whom he never had a good thing to say, as our ally. Last but not least, the reactions from the right-wing parties show how much the mood has turned. Berlusconi's Forza Italia praises the European Recovery Fund over the Green Clover, but also the post-fascist Fratelli d'Italia party, which is now 14% in the polls under its chairman Giorgia Meloni, criticized cautiously. Prime Minister Conte left the EU summit on his own 2 feet, meaning he did not fall over. Meloni remarked in advance before complaining that Conte could have got more and better. Only Matteo Salvini, the head of the Lega, is weathering as usual. After the end of the summit, he said that a super swindle had been passed in Brussels, but he already wrote back a day later, announcing that the Lega would examine closely what will happen with EU funds in the coming months. This runs off the government coalition. It mocks the bad-tempered Lega boss. The 5-star MEP Dino Giarusso commented, "Conte beats Salvini with 209 billion at 2 cents." And despite the spread headlines, the EU Parliament did not veto the package. They want amendments on conditions and with their vote brought the legislation just to a conciliation committee with the European Council to discuss the amendments. And if you now want to know more about European politics from a German point of view, YouTube has chosen another of my videos right here in the end screen, right next to your chance to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in my next video. Click and enjoy und viel Spaß!